Libra, 3 signs that you are about to leave this world. There's a version of you that died a long time ago, and no one held a funeral for it. No candles, no farewells, no respectful silence. It just faded away, slowly, while you kept smiling, kept mediating, kept being the person everyone could count on to solve anything. And maybe now, hearing this, something inside you has already recognized what I'm talking about, even without being able to name exactly what it is. You learned that Libra is the sign of balance, of harmony, of that peace that resolves conflict with a well-placed phrase and a smile at the right moment. But nobody told you the back of the story, that much of that peace was never chosen. It was built, brick by brick from a very young age, as a way to ensure that you would be accepted, included, loved, as long as you didn't disturb anyone in the process. And the problem with a peace built this way is that it comes at a price. Quietly, almost without you noticing, it asks for pieces of you in exchange for keeping everything in order. A desire here, swallowed to avoid friction. An opinion there, kept to yourself because disagreeing seemed too dangerous. A genuine wish stifled because giving in was always easier than sticking to a no. Over time, these pieces added up, and what remained was a person extremely competent at keeping everyone comfortable and extremely disconnected from what she herself feels when no one is watching. This has a name, even if it still sounds strange to hear. A part of you is dying. Not in the literal sense, in the most real sense that exists. That of an identity that was built to survive and that now no longer fits the size of who you are becoming. This video exists to show you 3 signs of this silent death. Signs that, if you are a Libra or love someone who is, you have probably already felt, but never had the words to explain. And most importantly, why this death, however uncomfortable it may seem now, is not the end of anything. It's exactly the opposite. Before we get to the signs, we need to understand a mechanism that Libra unconsciously constructs, the rigged scale. Everyone thinks Libra seeks justice because it is just. But there's a deeper version of this. Libra seeks external justice, mediating every conflict around it, resolving every injustice it sees in the world, often as a way to avoid confronting an injustice that was never resolved within itself. A market scale, adjusted to always give the result that pleases the observer, never the real weight of what is being weighed. And if this scale has been skewed for years, the uncomfortable question that lingers is, what exactly has it been hiding from you all this time? The first sign begins here, in the territory of the tricked scale, a tiredness without a clear name. It's not the physical tiredness of a full day, it's something else. The exhaustion of holding a glass full to the brim for hours, unable to let go without spilling a drop. Because spilling would mean disappointing someone, creating discomfort, shattering the image that everything is all right. This tiredness is treacherous because it doesn't warn you. It disguises itself as responsibility, as kindness, as I like to help. For a long time, it even works as a comfortable explanation. But there comes a point when the body can no longer sustain this explanation on its own. A moment when the desire to disappear for an entire day, to not answer anyone, to not solve anything for anyone anymore, begins to appear with a strong insistence that wasn't there before. It existed, but what if this persistence isn't a flaw to be corrected, but the first visible crack in a version of yourself that has already served its purpose and now only asks to rest? It was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book, The Divine Path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose. Doesn't treat Libra as a problem to be solved, but as an inner language to finally be understood. It exists to help those who wear the scales develop the ability to find real balance. Not the kind manufactured to please the world, but the kind that is born when you stop getting lost in the search for others' harmony and finally begin to consider your own. If you've made it this far, feeling this weariness in your body, still processing what you've just recognized in yourself, this discomfort is no coincidence. It's a sign that something inside you is ready to stop pretending. And this kind of recognition rarely returns with the same force after the distractions of daily life take over again. That's why it makes sense to act now, while it's still alive within you. The link is in the first pinned comment, but be aware, this content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy, and leave a comment. When was the last time you did something just because you wanted to, without thinking about who it would please? Perhaps you've felt this without knowing how to name it, that feeling of playing day after day, the music that others can, until you forget the melody you yourself once wanted to compose. A musician like that remains in tune, continues to be applauded, continues to be called to play at every party, and inside, little by little, begins to forget their own sound. Pleasing has ceased to be a gesture and has become anesthesia. And anesthesia, by definition, doesn't cure anything. It only prevents you from feeling the pain while it remains there, intact. The second sign is exactly this. When pleasing others ceases to be a choice and becomes an automatic reflex, almost impossible to turn off, you agree before processing whether you truly agree. You smile before you feel like smiling. You offer help before even checking if you have the energy left to give. And the most curious thing is that this reflex doesn't appear out of nowhere. It was trained, repetition after repetition, in a time when pleasing others was, in fact, an intelligent way to guarantee security. A child who learns early on that disagreeing leads to fighting, and that yielding leads to peace, isn't being weak, they're being strategic, in the only way they knew how. The problem is that this strategy, useful in childhood, continues to operate decades later, even when the danger they were trying to avoid no longer exists. It's like an alarm system installed in a house that changed owners a long time ago, but keeps going off for the same old reasons, even without a real threat. And if someone asked you now what you really want, without thinking about who will like the answer, how long would it take you to answer honestly? It's also worth noting how this reflex manifests physically, not just in words. The shoulders that rise slightly before disagreeing with someone, the breath that catches in the chest at the exact moment when it would be necessary to say, "No, I prefer it this way." The body often knows the truth before the mouth dares to repeat it. The mask Libra wears isn't fake in the sense of lying. It's real, trained, efficient. So efficient that it's learned to smile on its own, even when inside there's sadness, anger, or exhaustion that has never been processed. It functions like an emergency light. It stays on even after the main power to the house has long since died. From afar, everything seems fine. Up close, it's just the last battery holding up the appearance of normalcy. This mask didn't emerge out of vanity. It arose as protection, at a time when showing sadness, anger, or frustration seemed too risky enough to alienate people, generate judgment, or simply not be well received. So the face learned to organize itself even before the emotion had finished unfolding internally, a smile that arrives before true joy, a calmness that appears before the anger has even been fully felt. The problem is that emergency lights weren't made to last forever. At some point, the battery runs out too, and when that happens to a person, it's not a dramatic collapse. It's more subtle, more silent. One day, in the middle of an ordinary conversation, the urge to smile simply doesn't come. The usual words don't flow as easily as usual. And there, in that small instant of failure, something genuine escapes through a crack that the mask couldn't close in time. These moments are often quickly dismissed. It was just a bad day. Tomorrow I'll be back to normal. But they are not isolated accidents. They are the real face trying, timidly, to remember that it still exists beneath so much practice. And then comes the question that bothers us more than any other. How long can a mask smile on its own before the face behind it completely forgets how it truly feels? And there's an important difference between consciously using a mask as a tool and depending on it simply to survive the day. The first is a choice. The second is a prison disguised as social competence, and the better someone is at this performance, the harder it becomes for those around them to perceive that behind so much apparent lightness, there is accumulated fatigue that no one has ever been invited to see. If this question bothered you, perhaps it's because, deep down, you already know the answer, and you still don't know what to do with it. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose was created precisely for this moment when the mask begins to weigh more than it protects. It shows, in a practical and non-judgmental way, how Libra can rediscover its own inner beauty without needing to constantly perform harmony for the outside world. The last copies are running out, and this content may be taken down at any time. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey toward the clarity and genius you deserve. And we come to the third sign, perhaps the most disguised of all, indecision. You've probably heard more than once that Libras take a long time to decide because they see both sides of everything. But there's a deeper and more uncomfortable interpretation hidden behind this repeated phrase. What if the indecision wasn't about not knowing, but about not having the internal permission to admit what one already knows? Imagine a person standing right in the doorway between two rooms. From the outside, it looks like hesitation, but they're not there because they don't know which way to go. They're there because crossing the threshold means admitting aloud that they won't return to the previous room, that a choice has been made, that someone perhaps will be disappointed by that choice. And Libra, trained to avoid disappointing others, prefers to stay in the doorway for as long as necessary. Notice how this appears in the small details of everyday life, the message written and rewritten 3 times before being sent. The "let me think about it" response given to a question whose answer, deep down, had been ready for weeks. The restaurant dish chosen after asking what everyone at the table will order first, as if one's own will could only exist after mapping the will of others. None of these moments, in isolation, seem serious. But together, they draw a pattern. The certainty is there, it's just waiting for permission to be spoken aloud. And this waiting has a silent cost. Each time certainty is delayed, it loses a little strength, a little urgency, until it almost seems as if it never existed, like a door that, from being left ajar for so long, forgets which of the 2 positions, open or closed, was truly its own. But how long exactly can one stand at the door before the simple act of waiting becomes in itself the most painful decision of all? There is also a more painful version of this pattern, indecision used without conscious intention as a way to outsource responsibility for an outcome. If the decision is never entirely yours, if you let time, circumstances, or the opinions of others decide for you, then, if something goes wrong, it's not entirely your fault either. It's an ingenious protection, but it's also a subtle way of never fully living your own life, always one step behind taking ownership of your own life. Standing still at the door seems safe, but feigned safety also comes at a price, and that price is time you can never get back. It is by recognizing this doorway that so many Librans have found, in the divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose, a different way to deal with their own indecision, not as a flaw to correct, but as an invitation to finally choose in their own best interest. Access to this content is limited and may be removed without notice. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey toward the clarity and genius you deserve. And this is where the three signs meet and form a single truth: the weariness of holding the full glass, the mask that has learned to smile on its own, the indecision that is actually a hidden certainty. None of these three is a sign that something is breaking inside you. They are signs that a shell is cracking, and shells don't crack because something from the outside attacked them. They crack because what's inside has grown too much to continue fitting there. Think of any natural process of transformation. None of them happen without the previous form first dissolving. The seed needs to break open so that the root can find space. The shell needs to become too small so that what is inside is forced to look for a new one. There is no new beginning that doesn't first require the end of something. And however frightening this idea may seem when applied to a person, it is, in fact, the gentlest possible explanation for everything that the three signs were announcing. This is the death this video has been talking about from the beginning. Not the death that is feared, but the one that is expected without knowing it is expected. The version of you that learned to exist by pleasing, mediating, shrinking to fit into the space that others made available. That version is letting go. Slowly, without drama, but definitively. And here is the paradox that is perhaps the most important of this whole process. The more this old version resists leaving, the more the signs intensify. The fatigue increases, the mask cracks more frequently, indecision weighs more heavily each day, not because something is getting worse, but because what lies beneath is, with increasing urgency, demanding to be heard. And if this part is truly ending, the question remains, what exactly is born in the empty space it leaves behind when it finally goes away? Perhaps that's why so many Librans describe this phase of life with words that sound contradictory at the same time. Exhausted and relieved, lost and more lucid than ever, afraid of what comes next, and yet unable to return to their former selves, even if they wanted to. This isn't confusion. It's exactly how a true transition should feel on the inside. This empty space is frightening because it's unknown. But it's precisely in this space that the real version of you, the one that never needed to perform a balancing act to be accepted, finally has a place to exist. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign towards a life of purpose was created to accompany Libra precisely during this transitional moment, when the old shell has already cracked, but the new form is still organizing itself from within. It's a map to this nameless territory, and access to it is about to end. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey toward the clarity and genius you deserve. What emerges from this empty space is not a new balancing act. It is a balance that finally needs no audience. A scale that, without the false weights that only existed to please those watching, settles on its own. Effortlessly, without manual adjustment, without anyone needing to approve the result. It's important to state clearly, nothing described here means that Libra's gentleness, their capacity for meditation, for empathy, for seeking harmony, is a flaw to be eliminated. Quite the contrary. These are perhaps some of the rarest and most necessary qualities in this world. What was ailing wasn't gentleness itself. It was the version of it that existed only to avoid discomfort for others, never to express an inner truth. The cure isn't ceasing to be gentle. It's becoming gentle with oneself as well, with the same generosity that has always been offered to everyone around. Perhaps this is Libra's quietest beauty, the ability to die to old versions of itself as many times as necessary and still remain recognizable, remain whole, remain beautiful in each new form that life demands. Not because it has learned to shrink, but because it has finally learned to stand on its own 2 feet without needing anyone else to hold the other end. If any of these 3 signs resonated with you today, perhaps it's not cause for alarm. Perhaps it's simply the soft, constant sound of an old part of you saying goodbye. so that another, truer part can finally breathe. And if that's the case, perhaps the right question isn't what's wrong with me, but a very different one. What exactly is this new version of you ready to become? There is no set deadline for this transition to end, nor is there a final, definitive version of balance that, once achieved, never needs to be revisited. The life of someone carrying the scales will likely continue to demand, from time to time, small deaths like this, small detachments from identities that have already served their purpose. And perhaps true maturity is not about stopping going through this, but about learning to navigate each of these passages with a little less fear than the last time.